Go.
Hi, I'm James Glines. I'm going to be talking. This is my second story, my story time with James. This one's going to be about July 11th, 1991. Way back in my Army days, I had joined the military in 1989 before the Berlin Wall came down. And by the time I made it to basic training, Saddam Hussein had invaded the Gulf of August of 90, and my orders that were supposed to be for Germany got changed, and I landed instead later in May of 1991 after the first wave of the Gulf War happened with the 11th ACR. Any rate, we did some activities, we did some things, and make a long story short, once a day there'd be like a volley or a convoy that goes out in Kuwait headed towards Iraq. Saddam would do some maneuvers, we would do some maneuvers, and then they'd come back to base. Well, base happened to be at Camp Doha, Kuwait. My job in the military was, at that time, I was a grease monkey. I was lower enlisted, E4 to E1, and my job was a track mechanic, and we would grease up things, and we would do preventive maintenance on Army equipment. Well, it just so happened that it was our turn, the second of the 11th ACR. They had went out, and then they came back. Most of the vehicles were still loaded with ammunition and all of that. Well, one of the things that the military does is called the Preventive Maintenance Checks and Services, or we called PMCS. And during one of these PMCSs, I'll probably put the links in the comments of the official military version of it, but while someone was checking out a howitzer ammo carrier, or we call it a FAS-V, FAS-V, it got lit on fire by either the heater or carelessness. Make a long story short, that one vehicle caught fire, and from my perspective, I was about 800 feet away. My company was HHT 211, or Headquarters Troop, and I was helping the fuelers, doing preventive checks and giving them a once-over before they leave the base. As a mechanic, we would look for things before they rolled out. We would stop it if they had no brakes, that's obvious, or they had a fuel leak. We wouldn't let them go. We had to fix it. So every vehicle that touched our hands, we could not let it go if it was unsafe to drive. So I was on top of one of those, about 10 feet in the air, and I saw with the corner of my eye that there was an orange fire, and then it went to green fire, and then it went to kind of a reddish fire. And then I saw people coming at me, all running my way, and we call them the gun bunnies. We call them, they're basically the howitzer drivers and ammo carrier drivers. And all they was saying was, ammo fire, ammo fire. And they ran past us as fast as they could, and we're like, yeah, something's on fire. We saw the Kuwaiti fire department roll past us. We saw them try to put out a fire with their fire truck, and it got worse. Well, I know this now, but it was white phosphorus, which is obviously burns a little bit easy, and is also igniting all the different charges that you load up a gun with to make a bullet go faster or farther or whatever. But all I knew at the time was there was a really cool looking fire about 800 feet away, and it was getting bigger. And so I was watching, and I got down off the vehicle and I started walking towards it, and all of a sudden it was like time stood still and everything kind of slowed down, just like they do in the movies where everything goes, and I saw what looked like birds flying away on the beach. If you ever had a car drive down the ocean and scatter the birds, I saw this giant eruption in front of me, and I remember looking up in the air, watching these big things flying up in the air and flying up in the air, and what felt like 10 seconds or 20 seconds later started falling left and right of me. What they were pieces of tanks. They were pieces of howitzers. They were pieces of Bradleys. These are all large tracked vehicles that took the brunt of the round. They're called copperhead rounds. The copperheads are designed to take out a 1 square meter grid coordinate of shrapnel. They're anti-personnel. They clear forests or whatever. But what I didn't know was one set off a whole vehicle that has 83 of them, not to mention all the other rounds that they have. And all these vehicles are parked, they call dress right dress, or they were battle ready, ready to roll. And it was a chain reaction. One went off, another one off. And there's a video, I can find it. I think it's called FTC Doha. But it was a compilation of a bunch of, at that time, was modern camcorders recording from different countries of the world. Canadians recorded it, people from China recorded it, people from America, the United States, whatever. But all these people got different snippets of this ammunition fire that blew up. Well, what I realized after the fact was the parts that were falling down were all these big pieces of equipment. One came right at me, and I went to the side, and as I went to the side, it hit my friend, and it was a tow cable. It stapled him and his leg to the ground through the hot asphalt, and I had to turn around and help pick him up and try to get him out, because it kind of broke his leg and lacerated his leg. And I was helping him, and another explosion would go off. And this time everybody kind of blasted backwards this way and against the wall. And with each explosion, the intensity was worse. And we would hear funny noises like brrr, whoop, 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 whoop. What we know now was those were the shells, where the round went this way and the shell went this way. If it's not fired in a gun tube, then it just goes apart like in fireworks. And at low speed, those heavy rounds were hitting people. It was going through walls. The shell was hitting people. Or the Persian Gulf was right outside the camp at Camp Doha, and we were hearing splashes of all these things hitting the water. Containers, or we called them consolidated expressways or connexes, they were stacked on top of each other with missiles and bullets and claymore mines. They started going off. Fuelers, like the one I was just touched, got hit by the shrapnel. The fuel hit the ground, and then that fuel would spread out and light everything on fire and start burning hot. It would burn more things. The entire northern compound of Camp Doha, with a lot of ammunition stored on tanks and vehicles and connexes, all blew up and melted. And it was an amazing scene where if you got up against the wall for shelter, you didn't realize that there was glass above you. And with every explosion, glass would fall out and come down on you and hit you in the neck or hit you in the back. And a lot of people were in their underwears because they were woken up by this. And they just came out running like they thought we were attacked. Matter of fact, F-18 Tomcat buzzed us a couple times to see who was shooting at us or launching bombs at us. It was ourselves. And we all started running for the walls. And a funny thing was they have porta potties, or they call them latrines. They're made out of wood, and people were gathered around the wood thinking they would be safe. And with every new explosion, they would scatter, and they'd see, like, let's say a part of a tank would roll by like a bowling ball and knock over everything, and people realize they're not safe. And then we realized that there was really nowhere safe when bombs are going off. There was no protection from nothing. It was a false sense of security. And the only place that we can go was away, which is a 10-foot wall with concertina wire. Basically, you climbed on top of someone and cut yourself jumping over the wall. Eventually, people started cutting the wires and making space for everyone to leave. But it was very organic. It was very spur of the moment. All we knew was we had to get out. and we could still hear pieces falling in the Persian Gulf as we were exiting the compound and going north and northeast away, which ended up being a dead end into the water anyways. We were trapped. And it was very interesting that I wasn't really hurt. I think my hearing was damaged. I found out later that when that compression happened, that's a damage to your mind from like being around a high blast area or whatever. And it took me until 2011 to go talk to the VA about it, and they helped work me through PTSD. And I'm happy to say, thanks to Waco VA, what's called Project Serve, with a guy named Zach Harned, he helped me work through everything over the period of a year, and I'm better to this day. But back to July 11th, 1991, I was happy to make it. Some people died. Matter of fact, every day afterwards, I was the lowest ranking guy. We'd put on a hat, just a t-shirt and some pants and some boots, and we'd go out and sweep and clean up. We didn't know it, but we were sweeping up depleted uranium, dust. Also, one of the times I went out there to go get into a vehicle, I got stopped by a guy named Captain Almond. His name was Captain William Almond. He saved my life. Apparently, there was a tripwire that I know now. I was a dumb private in the military, but when the Adams round is deployed by the howitzers, they bounce and lay out sensor wires that either magnetically or by tripwires, they're anti-personnel mines. They're designed for anybody who trips it. They spring up, cut you in half, and blow up and kill everybody around you. So basically, he was saving himself, but he also saved me. That they sent us out to go get the vehicles, as well as do daisy chains with all these unexplored ordinances that went off, that we were in chains unloading vehicles full of unexploded ordinances. And just so happened 3 people died 3 days later when one of those rounds went off. Let's say that was me. This guy and 2 guys next to him, there was nothing found of him except for it was a pink cloud, and it just ripped everybody to shreds. It injured everyone else, and those 3 guys, all that was left was a helmet and some boots. They found nothing other. They knew who was on the detail, and they were just vaporized. So this really didn't hit the United States except for a tiny little blurb maybe in the Stars and Stripes. You can Google it. I'll put the link in the comments. But you could say it's a lessons learned. It was a fail. My takeaway from that was I kind of went to my happy place. I survived by not freaking out too much and helped people as I could. And we spent the rest of our time until about September repairing all the damage. There was a lot of it. So every tire, every window, every door was shredded to nothing. Some Humvees were melted down to about a 3x4 square. You couldn't even recognize it. The heat was so intense. And we still found, when I came back in 2003, one of the buildings I went to, if you got high enough in the building, you could still see they never cleaned up the ammunition that rained on other buildings. It was still on the roof. They never finished cleanup. So I'm glad I made it. I think the USS Forrestal that Senator John McCain was in was the only worst one. There may be other military ammunition explosions, but I made it. I'm thankful my friends made it. There's a guy named Frank Matsky that got severe brain damage when everyone was hiding under a vehicle, and a part from a tank that had exploded came and hit everybody hiding under a vehicle, and for him, he got extensive brain damage. He was 2 years in a coma, and I found out later he made it. So I was happy about that. He was a real energetic guy, fun guy. Well, he wasn't a mushroom, but he was a fun guy. Anyways, so thanks for listening. Maybe in about a week I'll do story time number 3. Thank you very much.